New York City, 10:46 a.m. Bell and Thorn Bookshop, Orchard Street. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, the stale scent of burned plastic lingering from an overused microwave in the back room. At Bell and Thorn, a small bookstore tucked between a laundromat and an abandoned deli, sunlight filtered through tall, warped windows and cast golden rectangles across the dust-covered hardwood floors. Behind the counter, Ellie Monroe, age 27, folded a receipt with careful fingers. Her smile was polite, distant, the kind that left no room for small talk. She was not a full-time employee, just a morning shift fill-in from Tuesday to Saturday. She preferred it that way, low exposure, quiet routines, and no questions. No one here knew she once stood at the front of a university lecture hall. No one knew that French was practically her second native language. They only knew that Ellie was always on time, read too fast, and rarely spoke. That morning, a group of well-dressed men entered the shop. Tailored suits, polished shoes. The kind of men who rarely ventured into used bookstores that sold rare poetry anthologies and political manifestos from the 1950s. Ellie looked up briefly as laughter echoed behind the European literature shelf. "What makes a book truly great?" one of them asked, his voice loud and teasing. Another, older, silver-haired tall, held up a thick hardcover book. His voice carried across the room. "If the clerk over there can read this passage in Old French without a dictionary, I will give her my watch," he said, gesturing to the gleaming Patek Philippe on his wrist. Laughter followed, loud, dismissive, confident. Ellie, who had been restocking a set of post-war essays, paused but did not turn around. She said calmly, "The question isn't whether I can read it. The question is whether you understand why that line was written in a windowless room." Silence fell instantly. The silver-haired man, Nathaniel Clerk, CEO of a digital publishing firm, turned. His expression shifted slightly as he saw her for the first time. "Excuse me," he said. Ellie stepped from behind the shelf. Her bookstore apron was wrinkled and faded. Ink stains marked her fingertips. "Page 242, she said. "Le silence d'une chambre sans fenêtre." That line isn't literal. It's a metaphor for psychological captivity. The author wrote it after the death of her daughter. The silence deepened. No one laughed now. 1 hour later, near the bookstore cafe counter, Nathaniel returned alone. There was no smirk this time. "Ellie Wright, I wanted to apologize if what happened earlier felt offensive." She looked up from her notes. "I wasn't offended. I just believe that turning knowledge into a game says more about your own insecurity than anyone else's ability." Nathaniel gave a slow nod. This time his eyes held curiosity, not condescension. "Then let me ask something real, something." Ellie waited. "We just acquired a handwritten manuscript, never published, written in a mix of Old French and ecclesiastical Latin. It is by a female writer who was institutionalized in the 19th century. Some critics believe it is a coded satire of European social systems revolutionary for its time. But no one has managed to translate or interpret it fully." He paused, watching her. "If you can translate and annotate it within 72 hours, I will offer you co-editorial credit. Your name on the first release. Not money. Something bigger. A voice." Ellie was quiet. This time she did not say, "I will try." She simply nodded. She was not looking to be famous. She just wanted to be seen as real. Ellie's apartment was on the top floor of a crumbling brownstone in Brooklyn, the kind where water pipes moaned in the walls and the radiators hissed like they held secrets. Her door creaked when she opened it, the soft groan echoing into the quiet. The attic room she rented was sparse second-hand furniture, a mattress on the floor, and a rickety desk shoved under the slanted window. Books lined the walls like insulation stacked in uneven towers. Above the desk hung a single photograph. A woman with sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, and a proud smile. Ellie's mother. She stood in the doorway for a moment. The manuscript in her hands, then gently closed the door behind her. The folder Nathaniel had given her was older than she expected. The pages inside were delicate ink, faded in places, but the writing was precise, almost obsessive. No title, no author, just a preface written in tight script, signed with an initial L. Ellie placed the first page on the desk, turned on her desk lamp, and began. The language was a battlefield. Old French danced with Latin. The metaphors were sharp-veiled, filled with bitterness and coded rage. It wasn't just a diary, it was a rebellion dressed in prose. Hours passed unnoticed. She moved between translation and research, opening old notebooks, referencing grammar rules stored in memory rather than books. She did not stop to eat. Her fingers moved like they remembered what her heart had tried to forget. By midnight, the room was filled with scattered pages, her notes, translation fragments, annotations. She paused only when a phrase stopped her cold. To be seen as mad is easier than to be seen as dangerous, so I let them call me broken. Ellie's breath caught. She looked out the attic window. The city was a muted glow beneath her, but her eyes saw something else. A classroom in Paris, a desk stacked with her thesis, and the moment she knew she had to vanish. Not for guilt, for safety. 3 years earlier, Paris. The research had been hers, the project her design, the breakthrough hers alone. But when her advisor submitted it under his name and she threatened to expose him, the threats came quietly and swiftly. A report leaked, accusations fabricated, an anonymous article hinted at plagiarism. Her reputation evaporated overnight. No one had defended her, not even the university that once called her brilliant. So she left. She boarded a plane under her middle name, changed her address, changed her voice, and disappeared into New York's noise. Back in the present, Ellie blinked, heart racing, and returned to the manuscript. She worked through the night. At 4:15 a.m., she found it. Buried in Chapter 3, disguised in a parable, was a map of contradiction-coded metaphors for legal limitations placed on women's property rights. But it wasn't just about the past. The structure mirrored a modern algorithm used in content moderation AI. Ellie narrowed her eyes. This wasn't historical satire. It was something more. A hidden critique of systems old and new. A thread that connected institutional control across centuries. She wrote quickly now, translating and annotating, marking the patterns, deciphering the hidden logic behind the metaphors. At dawn, her fingers trembled, not from exhaustion, but from understanding. This manuscript, unread and misunderstood for over a century, contained a warning cleverly disguised about the machinery of silence, and somehow she had been chosen to find it. She stood slowly, went to the small mirror above her sink, and looked at herself. Unwashed hair, ink-stained hands, tired eyes, but also clarity. She would not disappear this time. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime on the 27th floor of Astor Publishing, a sleek tower of tinted glass and cold steel in Midtown Manhattan. Ellie stepped out, still wearing the same black sweater and trousers from the day before. Her coat hung loose over her arm. In her hands, a neatly bound set of translated pages, annotated footnotes, and one small handwritten letter folded inside. Receptionists glanced up as she passed, eyes flicking from her ink-stained hands to the badge clipped to her collar, visitor. None of them recognized her. None connected her with the girl from the bookstore. At the far end of the hall, a glass boardroom waited already, filling with senior staff and two legal consultants. The morning sun lit up their expensive watches, their well-fitted suits. Nathaniel stood near the head of the table, arms crossed, focused on the slideshow being prepared. He turned when he saw her. Ellie walked in without waiting to be invited. Some people blinked, a few whispered. One man muttered, "Is that the temp from downstairs?" Nathaniel raised a hand, silencing the room. "This is Eleanor Monroe," he said. "She'll be presenting the manuscript findings." He gestured toward the head of the table. Ellie set down the folder. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, precise. The manuscript, attributed to an anonymous 19th century writer, is not a personal memoir, she began. It is an encoded critique of power systems, first religious, then legal, and surprisingly modern computational structures that mirror those same patterns. Someone scoffed. "That's a stretch." Ellie opened to page 47 and pointed. This allegory references hierarchical data filtration. It mirrors exact logic gates used in the development of content sorting algorithms by social platforms launched over the last decade. A younger analyst leaned forward. "Wait, are you saying this text predicted modern systems?" "No," Ellie replied. "I'm saying it understood them, long before we gave them new names." She let the silence settle before continuing. This writer hid her critique because no one listened to women like her. Madness became a mask. She wore it to stay alive. The legal consultant cleared his throat. "If this goes public, we're not just publishing a forgotten literary voice. We're opening the door to an author who, by all accounts, saw the future. And if the media makes that connection..." Nathaniel looked around. "Then we'll be the publisher that recognized her, and recognized the person who brought her voice to light." Everyone turned back to Ellie. She didn't smile. She just said, "I have no interest in fame. But if you print this without her full story, including the annotations, I walk. And I take the proof of code reference patterns with me." A long silence followed. Nathaniel nodded. "Done." He looked at her. "And your name goes on the jacket." She hesitated. "Then write it properly." He nodded again. "Dr. Eleanor Monroe." The title landed like a stone dropped into water. The ripples were immediate. No one laughed now. No one looked away. When she left the room, she left the visitor badge on the table. In its place sat her manuscript. And her name. By the end of the week, Ellie's name appeared in a private industry briefing, circulated among publishing executives. At first, it was just a line at the bottom of a paragraph translation and annotations by Dr. Eleanor Monroe. Within days, emails trickled in. Some were respectful, some curious, and some were sharp. At Asta Publishing, a few senior staff who hadn't been in the boardroom began asking quiet questions. Who is she really? Why have we never heard of her before? Is she even verified? It started small. A comment left hanging too long in a meeting. A file not forwarded a project suddenly reassigned. Ellie noticed. She always noticed. But she said nothing. Until one morning, a colleague she barely knew slipped her a forwarded email thread. Subject line: Due diligence. Monroe. The contents were worse than she'd expected. It referenced her past work at the Sorbonne, her vanished academic posts, her sudden departure from Paris. It linked to a discredited blog post that once accused her of falsifying her own research. A lie spread during the collapse of her academic career. The thread ended with a line in bold: "We should consider the risk of associating the Asta brand with unverified voices." Ellie closed her laptop slowly. Her stomach turned not from fear, but from memory. 3 years earlier, the hallway outside the Sorbonne faculty office, Ellie stood holding a printed packet of data proof that her advisor had stolen her research. She was ready to defend herself. She had prepared for the meeting for 2 weeks. But before she stepped inside, a friend pulled her aside. "Don't," he whispered. "They already chose him. You'll lose more than your job." Ellie had walked out that day without saying a word. She had buried her name, her degree, her future. And now, the whispers had followed her across the ocean. That evening, she stood in the quiet of her attic apartment, a thin paper letter in her hands, the one she had found inside the manuscript days ago. Written in a narrow, slanted hand, it read, "To survive. I wore madness like armor, but it is not armor I want to be remembered for. If anyone ever reads this, remember me whole." Ellie folded the letter again, then turned to her own desk. She picked up her phone and dialed the one number she had avoided since arriving in the States. Her mother answered on the third ring. "Ellie." The voice was warm, cautious. "I need you to do something," Ellie said, her voice steady. "I need you to find the signed research copy I left behind, the one with the code structures and annotations. It's in the box, labeled irrelevant." A pause, then a soft laugh. "You always hid the most important things in boxes like that." At Astor the next morning, Nathaniel found her waiting in his office. "I know about the thread," she said before he could speak. He nodded. "I shut it down." She tilted her head. "Words or actions?" He pulled out a folder from his desk drawer and placed it in front of her. "I've hired a verification firm. Quiet, thorough, clean. They'll confirm your credentials not because you owe anyone that, but because I refuse to let assumptions speak louder than facts." Ellie stared at the folder. "That won't stop the whispers." "No," he said, "but it will make them irrelevant." A long silence passed. Then she added, "I didn't come back to be protected." Nathaniel leaned forward. "You didn't. You came back to speak." Outside the glass walls of the office, whispers still moved. But inside, Ellie sat straight, calm, and certain. She would not vanish again, and this time she would not winding alone. The package arrived in silence. No announcement, no signature. Just a small brown box placed gently on Ellie's desk one rainy Thursday morning. The paper was thick, hand-wrapped. Her name was written on a small white card, in clean, measured print, Dr. Eleanor Monroe. She opened it slowly. Inside, nestled in navy velvet, lay a brass nameplate, simple, elegant. The engraving read, "Dr. Eleanor Monroe, Director, Archival Research and Literary Discovery, Astor Publishing." Beneath the plate, etched directly into the wood frame of the box, were 5 words. "For the one who revealed silence." Ellie did not move at first. She ran her fingers over the letters. Once, twice. The metal felt cold at first, then warm, real. This was not a title she had applied for. It had not been offered in a meeting or whispered after hours as a possibility. It had simply appeared deliberate, tangible, and already carved. Nathaniel arrived just after noon. He knocked once gently before stepping in. His voice was quieter than usual. "You don't have to display it. I just wanted you to have it." Ellie looked up from the nameplate. "I didn't come here to be a title," she said. "I know," he replied. "But some titles aren't about status. Some are about history, about giving something back that was taken." She didn't smile, not at first. Then very slowly her lips curved, not a polite smile, not a defensive one. It was small, soft, and true. "Thank you," she said. Nathaniel nodded once, then turned to leave. But as he reached the door, two interns passed by in the hallway. One glanced in, then whispered without realizing she could hear, "Is that the girl from the bookstore?" Nathaniel stopped. He didn't look back. He simply said firmly, without raising his voice, "No. That is Dr. Eleanor Monroe. She leads one of our most significant discovery initiatives. You'd do well to remember her name." The interns murmured a flustered apology and moved on. Ellie sat still, hands folded around the edge of the box. The moment was small, but it landed with the weight of years. She had not demanded recognition. She had earned it. And this time, no one would misname her again. 3 months passed. The manuscript went to print. The first edition sold out in 5 days. Major literary circles called it a reclamation of lost genius. Academics debated whether the original author should be categorized as early speculative fiction or underground social theory. But what drew just as much attention was the woman who brought it to light. Dr. Eleanor Monroe became a name whispered not in suspicion, but in reverence. Still, she remained cautious. She kept her new office, simple books, organized blinds, half-drawn her nameplate resting in a quiet corner rather than on the door. When people knocked, she always responded, but rarely invited anyone to stay long. Then one morning, Nathaniel stepped in alone, holding a crisp folder. "We received an invitation," he said. "The National Forum on Literary Discovery. They want you to give the keynote." Ellie blinked. "That's not a small request." "It's not," Nathaniel agreed. "But it's yours." She opened the folder. Inside was the draft program. Her name, her story, her credentials. Even a photo someone had managed to take from a past event in Paris a lifetime ago. Ellie stared at it. The girl in the picture had a voice she lost, then rebuilt. And now, they wanted it on a stage. She closed the folder without speaking. Nathaniel watched her carefully. "You don't have to say yes." She looked at him steady. "That's not the problem. The problem is, if I say yes, I stop being invisible. And if you say no—" She paused, then answered not to him, but to herself. "Then I stay safe." But unheard, that night, Ellie returned to her apartment and opened a drawer she hadn't touched in over a year. Inside were remnants of the life she left behind. A worn passport, faded student ID, a ring she used to wear during lectures, and a sealed envelope addressed to herself. She opened it slowly. Inside was a note she had written the night she boarded the plane out of Paris. "If you ever find yourself again and the world asks who you are, do not whisper. Say your name out loud." Ellie sat back the note in her lap, eyes shining. She folded the paper, placed it in her coat pocket, and reached for her phone. 1 week later, National Forum stage. The hall was filled. Ellie stood behind the podium lights. Soft, but direct. The silence of the audience wrapped around her like a second skin. She took a breath. "My name is Dr. Eleanor Monroe," she said. "For years I stopped saying it. I let others rewrite my story in silence. I let myself believe that survival required disappearing." A pause. No one moved. But I was wrong. What I've learned, and what the manuscript I translated reminded me, is that disappearance is not protection. It is erasure. And I am done being erased. The audience rose to their feet before she even finished. Outside, after the speech, as rain misted the air and streetlights flickered, Nathaniel waited by the car. Ellie approached slowly, her coat open, her hands relaxed. He opened the door, but she didn't get in. She looked up at him. "You once asked me what I came back to do." He nodded. "To speak." Ellie smiled the full kind with nothing held back. No, she said, to be heard. And this time she was.